Commissioner Levitt,
Here.
Commissioner Cohn,
Here.
Commissioner Broyles, Commissioner Beatty,
Here.
Commissioner Depler,
Here.
Commissioner Jackson,
Here.
Chair Lee,
Present.
Councilmember Brost,
Here.
Mayor Boland.
Here.
Thank you. Moving on to tonight's agenda. We have a public comment session to start us off. Then we have a public hearing, and we have one old business item, and then we have one new business item under the other sections. So moving on, we have the approval of the minutes of September 21st. I have a motion to approve the minutes or modification.
Motion to approve.
Councilman Brost, and a second by Cindy Depler. Commissioner Depler, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are approved.
Thank you.
So I'll move on to the department's opening remarks. Mr. Vunich.
Mr. Chair, the department does not have any tonight, but thank you for asking.
Thank you. Moving on to the public comment session. Mr. Newberry, we have a couple.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have one individual who wishes to speak during the general public comment session. After this is complete, we do have another that will want to speak for the public hearing, but that's separate from this general public comment session. The individual who'd like to speak for the public comment session is Ms. Allen. And she'll be approaching the podium if we'll give her a few moments.
Okay.
Mr.
great.
Chair, I would like to ask while she's approaching the podium, if anyone of the attendees, because we do have quite a few people on the call, if they would like to speak,
1651
they could raise their hand.
Idlewild Farm Road. I live off Strecker Road and I live downstream from the Callahan property, which is really why I'm here to speak to you tonight. We have several things that are going on with that property, and which to all of the neighbors are of grave concern. And as you know, perhaps the property has been delisted. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I don't know, maybe the EPA is trying to step away from it. And we have a sidewalk that's being proposed to be put on that property, and that the city purchase an easement. Their sidewalk isn't going to go anywhere. There's no sidewalk on either side of it. But what's of concern to us is that the city doesn't want to do any testing. This is a Superfund site for those of you that don't know. And it's a big one, and it's a bad one. There were over 300 chemicals in barrels that were dumped on that property. And in 2 periods of time, the last of which was in 2012, they removed more barrels and more soil, because you see the barrels rotted out and all of these poisons commingled into brown gelatinous material. And, you know, of course you got to try, but the way our soil and the way our rock is constructed, you don't just dig that out and make it go away. This is a contaminated property. It's a poison property. And now the city wants to buy an easement to put a sidewalk in. That really troubles me, because then that means the city has liability for this piece of property because they're going to buy it. And I'm here to tell you that that property is not clean. It will never be clean. And I'm also concerned about the overlay district. Mr. Vunich has been kind enough to create a meeting for us on Wednesday night to try to answer some of the questions. And of course, my concern is how does this affect my property? And how does this protect my health and my well-being? And those are answers that the city is saying that that's what this document will do. And I need proof of that because I don't understand it. So that's what this meeting is about. You all may or may not meet this Callahan property someday as it crosses your desk for somebody wanting to develop it. This will be your legacy if you approve it. And I'm telling you, I live here. I live with this every day of my life, as do the people that live in the neighborhood. We live with this every single day. We don't forget it. We don't pretend that it doesn't exist. It does. And I don't think any of you live around this. And so you have to ask yourself, would you move on top of a Superfund site? Would you move next door to a Superfund site? So anyway, I just really wanted to introduce myself because, you know, I elect people to represent me, and sometimes, you know, it just isn't enough, and I have to come here and introduce myself. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Kathy, do we have any hands raised?
There are no hands raised, but a couple people just joined. So maybe if we could just wait 1 minute, and if any of the attendees on the Zoom call would like to speak during public comment, if they could raise their hand. I'm seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Moving on, we have a public hearing. So I'll read the public hearing script. In the city of Wildwood, public hearings are truly intended to accept comments and questions concerning this item. Since this request is being presented at a public hearing, no action is planned on this item tonight, and consideration of it is to be taken no earlier than November 2nd, 2020. This approach ensures that members of the Planning and Zoning Commission will hear all opinions before taking any action. The city's Department of Planning will address the comments, questions, and concerns that are raised tonight and include them as part of their formal recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The commission will allow all parties adequate time to present their positions. Persons in attendance at City Hall wanting to speak or receive future information on this item should fill out a speaker's card and leave it with Mr. Newberry. Those in attendance via Zoom webinar platform should use the raise hand feature to indicate that you wish to speak at this hearing. A team member will add you to the list of speakers, and that then will be communicated to me as chair, and I'll invite you to speak when it is your turn. In addition, information on this item can be found at the city's website at www.cityofwildwood.com. The commission would like to thank you for your cooperation and participation in tonight's hearing. So moving on, Mr. Newberry.
Chair Lee.
Oh, Mr. Vunich gets to read the request. Mr. Vunich.
Oh, thank you, sir. My apologies. PZ 12-20, Mary Cook, 2031 Joe's Way, Wildwood, Missouri 63005, care of Straight Up Solar, 11696 Lilburn Park Road, St. Louis, Missouri 63146. A request for a conditional use permit, CUP, in the NU non-urban resident district. Street address 2031 Joe's Way, locator number 20U530040, for the installation of roof-mounted solar panels, which are to be so situated on the dwelling and accessory structure, the garage, as to be visible from the adjoining roadway. This request is to be reviewed in accordance with Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban Resident District Regulations of the City of Wildwood Zoning Ordinance, which establishes standards and requirements for the installation of solar panels. The requested permit is required due to the panels' placement on the front-facing area of the roofs of the dwelling and accessory structure, which abut a private roadway. This particular site is located in Ward 2. Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, the department would now like to enter into the record the following items. The City of Wildwood Charter, the City of Wildwood's Master Plan, the City of Wildwood's Chapter 415, the zoning ordinance of its Code of Municipal Ordinances, the file that has been developed and maintained by the department regarding this particular petition, and then finally, any testimony, exhibits, or other items produced as evidence as part of tonight's public hearing. Finally, Mr. Chair, with your permission, Mr. Newberry has about half a dozen slides that he can show at this time to orientate the Planning and Zoning Commission members and others in attendance regarding the property.
Thank you, Mr. Vonich. Mr. Newberry.
I also want to introduce myself. My name is Connor Waters, and I'm with the contractor Straight Up Solar. So as Travis goes through, if you have any questions, definitely let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Waters.
Thanks.
Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one moment. My apologies, I shared the wrong screen. There we are. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Zoning Commission, the subject property is highlighted in the blue square. This aerial map is provided just to orient you where the property is located within the City of Wildwood. It's in the northeast corner on a private street named Joe's Way, north of Valley Road. This is a more zoomed in version of the aerial just to show the placement of the existing dwelling and the accessory structure, which is where my hand icon is right now. And then an aerial of the home and the accessory structure with the layout, the proposed layout of the roof mounted solar systems. Following this slide will be a series of photographs of the subject property from the private street, Joe's Way. This is standing at the petitioner's driveway, I believe, looking to the north and east. Standing at the same location, looking towards the south and slightly west towards Valley Road. And at the same location, this is photos provided just to show what's across the street from the home. It's a recreational baseball field for that homeowner. This is standing at the driveway looking towards the accessory structure in the foreground, and in the back you can see the home and the roof. And I was out there taking photos on the same day that Straight Up Solar was out there. So there are cars in the driveway there. This is the side of the accessory structure that's proposed to have panels, and then beyond the house here is where it's proposed to have roof mounted panels. And that concludes the department's short slideshow presentation. And as Ms. Waters introduced herself earlier, she is available on the call. And Mr. Chair, we do have one member of the public in attendance at City Hall who would like to speak whenever you deem that appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. We'll move on and let the public speak. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
if I may, would Ms. Waters like to do a short presentation to the benefit of the commission? And then Ms. Waters may say something that the attendee or others would like to address as well.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Ms. Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a fairly straightforward array that consists of 27 solar modules. As you can see from the aerial layout, the portion of the array that's on the garage would be somewhat street facing on the private road, but and a very uniform layout that we think would be visually pleasing with the aesthetics. That is really all that I have, as long as there are no more questions. But I would love to hear any feedback or input.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Newberry, are you controlling the speakers?
Yes, sir. I do have one speaker in attendance here at City Hall who'd like to speak. It's Miss Babb.
Welcome. We'll wait until she approaches the podium.
My name is Frances Babb, and I live at 2001 Kerrsdale Court in Clarkson Valley. I am here to support Mary Cook's desire to put solar on her house and on her garage. I want you to know that I share a property line with Mary Cook, but I cannot see her house or her garage because it's up a great, big, huge, steep hill. And in that area is a very densely wooded area with lots of thickets in it. So it's difficult for me to get up there to my own property line, much less see what she has over on her side. I would support Mary's desire to go solar, even if I could see what she is constructing. And I have 6 reasons why I would support her. Number one is I have solar myself, and I have 52 panels which face the street, and I live in Clarkson Valley, so I am in the same situation that she's in. Her neighbors, which are Steve Cuba, is a relative of hers, and they have solar on their house and their garage as well, and they live on Joe's Way. Solar is good for the environment, obviously, and I believe that solar is for the future. But it really shouldn't matter, where the street is. And I wanted to point out that Joe's Way is a private road, and all the people that live on Joe's Way are relatives of Mary Cook. And their father was a pioneer in the solar industry 50 years ago. And all of the Cuba family and the Cook families that live on Joe's Way are all supportive of solar energy, and at some point in time in the future would like to have solar on their houses as well. And lastly, I'd like to make a recommendation that Wildwood change its zoning laws, because the city has houses whose south-facing roofs face an adjoining road. And there's going to be in the future more and more requests for solar in this particular situation that comes before the Planning Commission that you guys are going to have to deal with. And at some point, you need to come to terms with the fact that south-facing roofs do face adjoining roads. I think you need to accept it and get over it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Newberry, any other comments from the public?
Mr. Chair, I don't have any others in attendance here in the council chambers at City Hall, but we do have some attending via Zoom. We'll just give them a few moments to use the raise hand feature if they'd like to speak on this public hearing. And I'm not seeing anyone on Zoom raising their hand.
Okay, I'll open this up to the commission if there are any comments. I do have one comment for Joe, unless there's another person wanting to speak. I'll let them go first. Commissioner Jackson.
Oh, there we go. I don't disagree. Solar is going to be continuing. We've had this discussion. We changed some of the rules for proper disposal of batteries and maintain. I think at some point in time, there's no city inspection for homes when they're bought and sold, which is how you kind of regulate that. I would think we might need to take a look at that in the future sometime about, and I don't know if there's an appetite for that, but I know that there was, as Joe Boonich said, at some point that was discussed a long time ago. This and other renewable energies might make sense for us to have more of a city inspection. It would solve a lot of issues, and you could maybe grease the skids to approve these in a more timely manner. That's all I would say. I'm not advocating doing it now, but it's something for consideration. This will come up over and over again. Thanks.
So Mr. Vuce, my question is this, when we came up with the zoning criteria for view from the public way, I wasn't sure if does that include a private drive? That's the difference of what we have here. And if not, then this probably wouldn't need planning commission approval.
The definitions relative to street and roadway collectively identify both private and public streets. And so in this particular case, regardless, the city is required to review any installation that is viewed from an adjoining or adjacent roadway. So we did check that to make sure we reviewed the definitions once again. The definitions are all encompassing in many regards.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Councilman Bros.
Yeah, I mean, we have solar on our home, and the way our home lays out, I mean, basically nobody sees it, but it seems like in this situation, I would support it. And I guess contrary to Mr. Jackson, I don't really view that we'd ever need a city inspection. I think it would just be incumbent upon the buyer and the seller to do their due diligence. It's actually not a complicated process. And in my case, I decided not to have batteries. So, but no, it seems like it would be, the layout, I don't think would be objectionable to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time in reviewing the project. And Travis, if any further questions pop up, let me know. I believe this has to go to another meeting, if that's correct, after. Okay. I look forward to hearing about it.
Thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Commissioner Helfrey, and I need a second. Commissioner Deppler. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, moving on. We have one old business item. Mr. Newberry, are you reading this?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Joe, the longer ones. He takes the shorter ones.
He gets the easy ones. We'll let you have the hard one. Will you read PZ 20, 21, and 25-15 Ackerley Place?
Yes, sir. PZ 20, 21, and 22-15 Ackerley Place, Payne Family Homes LLC, amended, care of Thomas Cummings, 10407 Bauer Boulevard, Suite B, St. Louis, Missouri, 63132. A request for modifications of the street network map of the town center plan as set forth for a property that totals 50.65 acres of area, which is located on the west side of State Route 109, north of Manchester Road. The requested modifications to the street network map reflect the petitioner's intent to alter the location and design components of the proposed Main Street extension through the subject site, along with other changes to the network of internal roadways. Accompanying the aforementioned town center plan street network map modifications is a request for a change in zoning from the C8 planned commercial district and R6A 3,000 square foot residence district with a planned environment unit to the amended C8 planned commercial district, town center workplace district, and R3 10,000 square foot residence district, town center neighborhood edge district, and neighborhood general district with a planned residential development overlay district for the same tract of land, again being located on the west side of State Route 109, north of Manchester Road. Locator numbers 23V110022 and 23W320013. street addresses 2431 State Route 109 and 17225 Manchester Road. Proposed use, a total of 140 detached single-family dwellings on individual lots with common ground, required public space areas, and a minimum of one commercial outlot fronting onto State Route 109. This revised advertisement supplants PZ 9-18, the reserve at Wildwood, which had been posted for public hearing on July 16, 2018 by the Planning and Zoning Commission, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Newray. Mr. Vunich, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, before the department begins its presentation on this particular matter, I would like to note that there are several representatives of the petitioner in attendance at City Hall tonight. The representatives include the petitioner's engineer and legal counsel that have spoken to the commission members in the past regarding this particular matter. So again, there are additional resources available at City Hall tonight to assist in our discussion, specifically those individuals. Also today, you received from Mr. Newberry some cross-section diagrams and a detail relating to the stormwater management improvements that are planned in association with the system of roadways that would serve the 132 proposed single-family detached dwellings on individual lots. I apologize for sending them out somewhat late in the afternoon. Again, a discussion was held between the petitioner's engineer and the Department of Planning, and we were doing our best to try to work through those items so as at tonight's meeting we would be able to discuss them with a single voice, so to speak. Acknowledging all the information and the attendees, the department has prepared for the Planning and Zoning Commission's consideration tonight the final draft of the letter of recommendation. As is referenced on the second addendum, the Planning and Zoning Commission did act on a favorable recommendation on September 8th. That action was not unanimous, but a majority did support proceeding forward with the development of the site for 132 single-family dwellings on individual lots. At the last meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on September 21st, there were a number of issues that were raised by commission members. Those issues related to certain conditions contained in the draft letter of recommendation. Many of the commission members felt that those conditions, those 7 that are identified in the second addendum, needed to be addressed and needed to be more favorable, so to speak, to the concerns of the Planning and Zoning Commission members. In the second addendum, the department has attempted to address those items to the satisfaction of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The first of those, which is referenced on page 4 of the second addendum, relates to the phasing of grading. As the commission is aware, there was a concern that grading phases would be done either in a single episode or in, let's say, not more than 2. As you can see from the attachment provided by petitioner's engineer, it is their intent to develop the grading plan in 5 phases. And the intent is to address the concerns of the commission by ensuring that the last phases in this particular instance are those where the roadways are in near proximity. And so again, I'm referencing the first 11-inch by 17-inch sheet that was dated September 30th. So as you can see, the areas along the roadways are shown as phase 4 and 5 of the 5-phase plan. The next item related to the phasing again, and it basically states that the developer shall provide a phased grading plan in association with the development of this site. The wording that was used to describe such is the condition itself in this case. Following that, there are a number of discussion points relating to right-of-way. Not so much the right-of-way itself, the roadway surface and the sidewalks and etc. But in this particular case, how the department had recommended the bioretention swales be part of the public right-of-way and maintained by the city of Wildwood. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not accept that recommendation and wanted the bioretention swales to be outside the public right-of-way and the responsibility of the homeowners association associated with this new project. The department has attempted to address that concern by changing the conditions for Main Street and the internal network of roadways that will serve the individual lots. I would note that the department identified a 50-foot wide right-of-way and then easements on either side to create a 60-foot wide area for the purposes of public ownership. I will note that Mr. Stock, the petitioner's engineer, and the department have been working on this item to find the right formula, so to speak, and the department would respectfully request some flexibility to the department to finalize those numbers, knowing again that none of the stormwater improvements associated with the bioretention swales will be the responsibility of the city of Wildwood. So again, Mr. Stock, the petitioner's engineer, and I are very close to coming up with the right measurements, but I do need a little flexibility as part of any motion to proceed with the final action on the letter of recommendation. The next item relates to stormwater management, a key component of this particular project, given what we are learning from our stormwater erosion task force, as well as noting the first downstream property is the city of Wildwood's community park. The department did add a requirement relating to all differential runoff would be retained on site. In discussions with Mr. Stock today, that standard may be impossible to achieve. So in this particular instance, the department would like flexibility to ensure that both the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, our Department of Public Works, and our experts in this field have an opportunity to review the plan and ensure that all stormwater, to the degree possible, is managed on this site and as little as possible is discharged downstream toward community park and other privately held properties. So again, I think we're very close on this one, but I just would again ask for a little flexibility. Thereafter, still with stormwater, the department has identified a requirement that the home builder, the developer, set aside $45,000 to the homeowners association for maintenance of the bioretention swales that will border all of the roadways associated with the property. The $45,000 equates to approximately 3 years of maintenance fees, and that is based upon an estimate, again, provided by the petitioner from an outside firm. The next item relates to the roundabout. And again, the department has identified that the petitioner is responsible for 1/2 of the roadway improvements associated with the site's frontage on Manchester Road. As we discussed approximately 2 weeks ago, it's hard to build a half of a roundabout and make it work. So the department has added language that requires the petitioner to escrow that 1/2 of cost so as that the city is not paying for it in the future when development occurs on the property directly across Manchester Road from the petitioner's frontage. Those are the items that the Planning and Zoning Commission identified. The department has, for all intents and purposes, addressed those as part of the draft letter of recommendation. I would note that petitioner still has a few outstanding items relating to architecture that they would like to discuss with the commission. So with the chair's permission and the commission's concurrence, I believe Mr. Doster would like to speak to those before a final action is taken on the draft letter of recommendation. So to summarize, the department has completed the final draft of the letter of recommendation, incorporated new conditions reflecting the direction of the members from the last meeting in September, and would like a little flexibility relative to the right-of-way dimensions and the stormwater, knowing that again, these items will return to the Planning and Zoning Commission as part of the site development plan process. And at that time, you will have the ability to understand the changes that have been made, again, all consistent with your direction from the meeting on September 21st. Mr. Chair, after a motion to discuss or a motion to proceed with the letter of recommendation in some form, the department will be available for any comments or questions. And again, I would note Mr. Doster would like to address the commission with your all's permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vernich. Let's move with the commission first. Mayor Boland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe, just so we can all be clear, the items you mentioned in reverse order, the roundabout, the escrow of 3 years of money for the bioretention at $45,000, the stormwater management issue as to which you wanted flexibility, and then what were the others before that?
The right-of-way dimensions, knowing again that no portion of the stormwater improvements, the bioretention swales can be part of it, but we're still trying to figure out how best to do that relative to the public right-of-way width, the size of the easements to the homeowners association for the swales, then getting the utilities and sidewalks all within a prescribed distance. I want to emphasize the department is aware none of the bioretention can be placed there. So that's two of the next ones. Thereafter, we basically go into the grading, and they are proposing 5 phases of grading. And there is a requirement that that preliminary plan be submitted before any permits.
Okay, and relative to grading, I thought I saw in your report that it recommended 2 phases.
Yes, under the grading code, it limits any phase of grading to no greater than 30 acres. So the department adhered to the grading code, so to speak, by doing the math. It's a 50-acre site, so each phase would be 25 acres, which is well below the 30-acre maximum. But in this case, I believe that Mr. Stock, the petitioner's engineer, actually did a pretty precise grading analysis to come up with the 5 phases. I think this helps balance the site and avoid haul or other alterations that ultimately would add more to the cost of the grading of the site.
So to be clear, can we approve 5 or are we stuck with 2 phases?
We can approve 5 because the way I modified the, bear with me here a second as I find it real quick. I believe the way I modified it is that it has to be a minimum of 2, but let me find the exact wording. I'm not doing you justice if I try to go from memory. So what I did is I added a minimum of 2 with no greater than 25 acres per phase, or as approved on the phased grading plan, which is now required. Okay. So that you have the authority to do 5 phases.
Okay, and then I also saw something else in your report relative to porches. Is that not something we need to debate tonight or discuss?
Yes, I believe that's what Mr. Doster wants to discuss with the commission if given the opportunity to speak at the podium.
Okay, so we have porches, the grading in whether we do 5 or 2 phases, the right-of-way dimensions, the stormwater management issue, 45,000 for 3 years, bioretention, and the roundabout. Anything else that we need to decide that we haven't seen previously?
I believe the department's addendum captures all the commission's direction, and I think the only outstanding item is the architecture, and I believe Mr. Doster wants to speak about the roundabout as well.
Okay, perfect. And so, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would suggest after we hear from Mr. Doster to expedite the business of the commission, given that the discussion could flow from one or the other of these things. And I kind of sense that they're, just given our past discussions and the department's recommendations, that there might be fairly quick consensus on at least a few of these. I would ask that after Mr. Doster speaks, that we bifurcate each one of these and take them one by one and sort of move them off the table in one direction or the other, and then come back to the whole. Otherwise, I'm afraid we might end up with discussion sort of going all over the board in every which direction. So.
Okay, that is a motion, but I had Commissioner Helfrey as a second speaker. Would you like to?
I'll second his motion.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to take each item under the conditions separately. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion has passed. So we can move on to Mr. Doster's presentation. Mr. Doster, podium's yours.
Thank you, Chairman Lee, Commission members, Mayor Boland, Councilmember Brost. My name is Mike Doster. I am the land use attorney on the development team for Payne Family Homes. Since the last meeting, we have been working on the items that the commission raised at the last meeting. And for the record, we support Mr. Vunich's request for flexibility on the right-of-way item and on the stormwater management item. As late as today, Mr. Stock provided Mr. Vunich with some additional information, which I know he and the department are considering. And so giving him flexibility on those two items will hopefully allow us to work those out before the public hearing at council. That leaves two areas that I would like to address briefly. The first area has to do with the lifestyle portfolio. This involves component 7 of the memorandum that was circulated to the commission. And that component relates to conditions 2B, 2D, and 4B. I would like the commission to consider 3 different perspectives with respect to that portfolio. The first is the perspective as a consumer or buyer of the various plans that are offered in that portfolio or would be offered in that portfolio. And I'll use myself as the buyer perspective. I looked at many of the lifestyle front elevations and was hard pressed to find one I didn't like. I had many attractive options and had freedom to choose. I was struck by the curb appeal of the elevations because of architectural design, features, and materials. Porch depth and porch offset did not play into the appeal as much as those elements, the architectural design, architectural features, and the materials. I had a wide range of porch depths and porch offsets to choose from. Front porch depth ranged from 18 feet to 4 feet with a 4-foot minimum. The porch offsets relative to the garage range from 14 feet projection to 6 feet of recess. So I, as the consumer or buyer, had choices. If I want a functional porch or a more functional porch, I could choose a model that offered that. If I didn't care that much about the functionality or the depth of the porch, but I cared more about the curb appeal, which is something that my wife and I would probably be considering, or I cared about both, there were models that would solve those desires of the consumer. So I guess the point is, from a perspective of a buyer or a consumer, I would suggest that they be allowed to choose what they want rather than legislating a result that would eliminate many of these options that are offered in the lifestyle portfolio. The second perspective I would like you to consider is that through many communications and meetings that we've had with staff, with the commission, I believe we've reached consensus that this development should not be like developments to the east, that it should be a transitional development. It certainly is not like the developments to the east. The site design itself is unique to St. Louis. Similarly, the product should not be the same. While Main Street product will be offered, the introduction of the lifestyle portfolio assures this development, this neighborhood will be unique and different. Third and finally, I would suggest that you look at this from the perspective of the non-monotony policy or desire that's been expressed a number of times. None of us, including the petitioner, want monotony. The lifestyle portfolio offers approximately 80 plans that are not available at Main Street. That is a good thing. There's wide variety with compatibility. You can have different plans next to each other, but they will look like they belong. Petitioner asks that the conditions reflect the choices available in the lifestyle portfolio, and that is part of the record that you have before you and is in your packet, but I can cover those in detail if you have questions about them. The second item has to do with the roundabout at Manchester Road. And just for the record, we don't see any reasonable nexus between the proposed development and the roundabout and the requirement that half the cost be carried by the development, namely the reserve. The HR Green Traffic Study done for the city does not recommend this improvement. Sheets 1 through 5 and 7 from the preliminary right-of-way plans for Manchester Road shared use path project prepared for the city and dated as late as September 14, 2020 by TWM show a crosswalk in this location to allow pedestrian traffic to safely cross Manchester Road to and from the school on the south side of Manchester Road. The industry standard, as far as I've been able to glean it from engineers, would support a crosswalk in this location, but not a roundabout in order to provide a safe pedestrian crossing to and from the school. So that's all I have on the two items that we consider to be still open, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Doster. Open it up to the commission. Mayor Boland.
Mike, you said that you had reached consensus and had no issue with two items on our list. One was the stormwater management and the other one was what?
What I stated, Mayor, was that Mr. Vunich had requested flexibility on two items. The right-of-way, which involves the cross-section, the latest of which was submitted by Stock and Associates today. And the second was the stormwater management plan. Both of those items, as I understand it, are under consideration by Mr. Vunich and the department. And Mr. Vunich requested more flexibility on those two items so they can be fully addressed and worked out before the public hearing in front of the council. So we support Mr. Vunich's request for flexibility.
Okay, thank you. And then Joe, a question for you relative to the roundabout issue. If we were to proceed with your recommendation relative to the cost on that, I mean, I'm assuming, first of all, we haven't made a decision formally that we want a roundabout in that location, correct?
There is no specific plan that shows a roundabout at that location. However, when the community college began phase 1 of the campus, we did require ample right-of-way to accommodate a roundabout. And since that time, we've always discussed a roundabout, but one's never materialized on a set of plans per se.
Okay, so if the commission were to approve this and include that cost, could we not include that cost with an understanding as a proviso that if we don't do the roundabout or we don't do the improvement that Mr. Doster is suggesting in terms of pedestrian passage, that we would refund that to the developer, but if we do, then we use it for either of those? We could do
Certainly,
that.
we could offer that. We could add language to the condition saying that in a certain time period, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, that if we have not either adopted a plan showing a roundabout or proceeded forward with construction of a roundabout, the amount of the special escrow is refunded to Payne Family Homes.
Okay, and then thank you. And Mike, Mr. Doster, a question for you, or just a statement, I guess, relative to the porch issue. I've looked extensively at the elevations that have been presented, and I've considered the department's recommendation. You know, these are, when we say porches, just to be clear, my understanding is that these include largely, with respect to this development, a platform to enter the front door, not necessarily something with railing and you know, chairs and tables and that sort of thing. And I'm just speaking personally, and we'll get to this in a moment. I didn't really, I mean, I noticed first of all that I think virtually all of the elevations that are in the report are close to 6 feet. I think one may have been 5.5 feet, with the exception of a 4-foot porch on what's called the Montego D3 car. It's a 2-story that actually right above that 4-foot porch has a fake balcony above it. And I'm not on the architectural review committee, but if I were, I would not vote for that one. Let's put it that way. It just didn't strike me as something that was terribly appealing. And in that regard, I just want to say I appreciate what you're saying about what consumers want. We just had this discussion in a zoning and development review committee meeting a few hours ago. That is, you know, we all have our litany of issues that we look at when we're deciding whether to approve or not approve something like this. And in my case, and I can only speak personally because I don't know what everyone else thinks about and how they prioritize them. That's what makes this group great. In my case, a consumer's view from outside of our city as to what they may want to purchase is on the list, but it is not anywhere near being at the level of a tail that wags the dog for me. And the tail that wags the dog, number one, is what is best for our city in terms of, you know, how it looks, how it fits with the rules and everything else. And number two, what our residents want. So I appreciate, you know, your point about you would buy this and consumers would like and not like. That's great, but in just speaking personally, that's not particularly at the top of the list. But thanks to you and Joe for answering my questions, and thanks to you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me ask those.
Thank you, Commissioner Beatty.
So I was, my comment was about the roundabout, and I mean, I love the roundabouts. They move traffic so much better on 109 since we've installed them. But as the thought just came to me, and I kind of agree with the petitioner, being that this is going to be right in front of Pond Elementary. Roundabouts typically are designed to move traffic faster and without stopping. And I foresee a lot of kids from the subdivision walking to school. And I think a roundabout at that intersection may be a bad idea with this student traffic that would be crossing Manchester Road right there, to where a 4-way stop might be a better option potentially down the road. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair, before we leave Commissioner Beatty's question, could we ask Rick Brown to maybe comment on it? Our Director of Public Works.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. As far as the question of the roundabout goes, I would see the roundabout as being a favorable component of the road design relative to traffic calming. And with the school in close proximity and with their bus transportation facility nearby, I think the roundabout would be favorable from that standpoint of calming traffic and slowing vehicles driving past the frontage of the school. We will certainly be looking at, and we already are looking at essentially a separate pedestrian crossing for students that would include flashing lights that would likely be separated from the roundabout itself. So that would probably be incorporated into our shared use path project separately. So hopefully I've helped explain my opinion on that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Just to let everybody know, if you've been to mountain states where they have lots of roundabouts, they do crossings either mid-block or like 10 or 15 feet. sooner than the approach to cut into the roundabout. So in both instances, they work with signage. You can have flashing light notification to let someone know that they're in the crosswalk. So this has been done quite a bit in Colorado. Commissioner Broyles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to state something that Wildwood always says, planning tomorrow, today. And I would concur with Mr. Brown that we've got a lot of, we're going to have more traffic on that road. And I'm not sure, I think it was Mr. Beatty that said it's right across, but it's not directly across where that roundabout would be. There is to the west, to the southwest, there's a parking lot there that is part of Pond School, Pond Elementary. And so there is a little separation there from kids walking right directly into that roundabout. And if you're talking about sidewalks further to the west with lighting and that sort of thing, it seems more feasible. Also, in the future, hopefully in the nearer future, there will be an extension to Generations Drive, and that can be utilized by that roundabout as well. So there will be a lot more traffic coming through from the development and from the college, and the number of buses. There's a garage there for Rockwood Reservation, and they're coming and going all the time. So I would speak favorably on having the roundabout in the plan. And also there's going to be a lot of students and parents in that subdivision, 132 homes. And I'm sure a lot of those are going to be young families that are going to be raising children. And of course, Pond Elementary will be the first school they'll attend. So I would be in favor of that particular item, number 5, to be included for the developer to assist with that as well, with the way it's stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Helfrey, and let's keep our topic focused on the roundabout, which is the first item.
So as far as the roundabout goes, I just kind of echo everything Mrs. Broyle said. I did have a question for Joe. Mr. Bunich, I'm looking at the diagram of the neighborhood where it empties out onto Manchester Road. Is that space between the Church of Latter-day Saints and the Pond Elementary, is that where Generations Boulevard is going to come through when the extension goes through?
There are 2 potential routes for the extension of Generations Drive. There is one through the community college's campus, which the city and the college have an agreement for if they ever begin a phase 2 or a second building. The second route is just a straight extension of the current terminus of Generations Drive North, which would be along the western boundary of Wildwood Square and through an undeveloped property that separates the road from Manchester Road.
But do I understand? I don't remember from the Town Center update team. I thought we discussed maybe if they did the roundabout way, not the straight one, but the one that kind of curved. Is that the one that comes out next to Pond Elementary?
Yes, ma'am.
So once again, I'm going to echo everything Mrs. Broyle said. I think there's going to be a lot of traffic there in the future with the community college and the grade school and the 130 plus families exercising that. So I would be in favor of asking the builder to help with that roundabout. But echoing what the mayor said, and offering that if we don't use don't make a roundabout, that we do refund them their money. And my suggestion would be to be 5 years out from when they are 75% complete. Thank you.
Commissioner Helfrey, is that a motion?
No, it's just, my comments to add to everybody else's.
Okay. In order, I'll go back to Commissioner Beatty, then I'll pick up Councilman Brost.
So Commissioner Helfrey basically asked the question that I was going to ask. I've got Google Earth up on my other screen here. And yes, seeing we've got from 109, there's the empty track, then there's the two churches, and then there's a narrow forested track, and then there's Pond Elementary. And so Generations Drive could either come out on the east side of the two churches or the in between the Latter-day Saints and Pond. That's to be decided.
I would suggest that's the case, not knowing the development of that particular property to the east of the churches. But I would assume whichever developed first, the second building at the community college campus or the corner lot that is east of the churches, that would probably be the route that would get priority. And if it's the route east of the churches and not through the community college property, the suggestion of the mayor to refund would be followed.
Okay. So if Generations Drive goes straight north, there won't be any roundabouts, but if it curves to the west, then we'll probably put one in. All right, thank you.
Councilman Brost.
Yeah, I guess my question, maybe Joe, you can answer it, but on the request to the developer to have an escrow for a roundabout, should the roundabout not occur, but there be other road improvements, would the city then refund 100% of the money, or would the money still be available for whatever the traffic experts say is the best solution? We've talked about refunding if no roundabout, but I think there will be some type of a road improvement requirement as a result of the 130 plus homes. Can you clarify that for me, Joe?
So,
Yes,
Mr.
the escrow
Chairman,
is only for the
point of
roundabout.
information.
The language of the condition requires the developer to build commensurate improvements along the frontage to address the increased use of Manchester Road. And that has to be done as a function of the development as it proceeds forward. There's no waiting on that.
So Mayor Boland.
Just a point of information, and after any other speakers, I think Commissioner Jackson wanted to speak. I'm going to make a few motions, but it will, to answer Commissioner Brost, it will depend on what this commission decides relative to the motion that it makes regarding those public improvements. And my intent will be, when I make the motion, as you'll see momentarily, that the money would be that is escrowed for those improvements would be escrowed for either a roundabout or other crosswalk or what have you improvements that may be done. So,
Commissioner Jackson.
I think Mr. Brost's commentary kind of cleared it up for me. So, but I just want to recap. So when we originally approved this, it was a make-ready situation where they made sure there was enough room for a roundabout. Then when they resubmitted their questioning, then the whole question about them paying for some of the roundabout, half of it or whatever, that's on the table. And we had some creep here and from phase 1 to 2, and I was a little confused, but Mr. Brost really helped out with his questioning. So now we're asking for any improvement and the roundabout that this new development pay for. I don't know, I'm gonna say, I guess half of that. Is that the case? Because it was half of a roundabout. I just want to make sure we're clear before I'm voting on something that it's half the roundabout, whether it's a roundabout or another type of traffic control improvement, right? Am I right on that? Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bunich.
Just so I'm clear, The design of this particular subdivision does show an access point on the Manchester Road. That access point could conceivably allow all of the traffic, if buyers would choose, to access Manchester Road. So the department's belief is that there has to be a commensurate amount of improvements on that road to accommodate that potential traffic. Now, traffic engineers such as Mr. Brown may say, oh yeah, we can divide the trips to one side or the other, that being Route 109 or Manchester Road. The worst case scenario though is we're going to see more traffic on Manchester Road. And so the argument is that they build a certain level of improvements now, not wait, so as we can guarantee a safe and functional access point at that location.
Mayor Boland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to make a few motions here that relate to the earlier motion of bifurcating these on a one-by-one basis, so we can hopefully expedite things a little more efficiently. And all of them are going to be contingent on the commission's final approval of what has been presented. So we voted to approve previously, and then it has come back for final approval. So each one of these, and I'll say that as long as I remember, with respect to each one of them, but just to be clear, each one of these motions is contingent on the commission's final approval of the go-ahead for this project, which means that if the commission doesn't approve that, then they all go away as if they never happened. So I'm going to start with what I think are the two easiest ones, those being the two that the developer's representative attorney, Mr. Doster, has said that he has no issue with the department's recommendation on, those being the stormwater management and the right-of-way dimensions. Those are related per Joe's answer to my question earlier. And so I would move, again, if the commission approves of moving forward with this development, that the department's recommendations relative to those two items in terms of flexibility and what we have seen as recommendations from the department be approved as part of that go forward vote. That is my motion.
We have a motion on the floor. I need a second.
Second.
Commissioner Cohn, second. All those in favor say aye.
All discussion.
Question.
Okay, Commissioner Jackson.
Oh, great. So on the stormwater management, is this the one where we're getting some escrow to take care of the city park? Is that part of this, or is that another one you're going to, that's on the table? I just want to make
that's different. If I may, Mr. Chairman, that is different, Commissioner Jackson. I asked Joe to give us the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. And so this relates to 2 of the 6. We're going to get to the 45,000 in about 2 motions from now. So
thank you. I was because they could kind of go together if you, I was just making sure. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Your motion passes.
Okay. And if I may make another motion, Mr. Chairman?
You may, Mayor Boland.
Okay, I would make a motion, something very near and dear to my heart, the grading. Rather than 2 phases, that the grading occur in 5 phases, as the developer has indicated a willingness to do, and as Director Vinich indicated, could be done consistent with our rules.
We have a motion on the floor for grading 5. The second, thanking Councilman Brost. Second, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes.
And again, that I think I forgot to mention, but that's contingent on the department's, or I'm sorry, the commission's approval of moving forward with this development. So I forgot to mention that. My next motion, again, consistent with that, the commission's approval of moving forward with the development is relative to the $45,000 escrow for the retention. Joe mentioned that it would be The 45,000, I believe, Joe, if I heard you correctly, would be good for 3 years. My motion would be, again, contingent on the commission moving forward with this, that the 45,000 be required for 3 years with the proviso that the city can ask for that to be renewed at each interval of 3 years thereafter, if needed.
Mm.
We have a motion on the floor. Councilman Brost. Second. We have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Yeah, okay. I've got Commissioner Helfrey, and then I'll move to Commissioner Broyles.
Okay, so this is something that I keep coming back to every week, and I have a question for you, Mayor, on your motion that you just made. I just want to state that from a personal perspective, from the neighborhood that we have, that that the stormwater retentions in our neighborhood are extremely expensive. It gets more expensive and more expensive and more expensive every year. And at about 132 homes, right off the bat, if it only costs about $14,000 plus to maintain it every year, that's about $115 per home per year just for maintaining the storm water retentions. And that's assuming that nothing goes wrong. That's assuming that you don't have to dig out dead bushes or regrade. So I just want that on the record, that that is a huge concern of mine, that we are passing that on to the homeowners association, also stating that I don't think that the city should be responsible for it. So then, having said all that, my question to you, Mayor, is when you say re-upping it every 3 years, what exactly do you mean by that? And that's all I have. Thank you.
If I may answer that, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor Bowen.
Okay, that is an excellent point. And actually, to your point, Commissioner Helfrey, I was going with the 45,000 each year, but what you just said caused me to think that actually the commission and the city should have at large should have discretion as to that. So I would, if it's okay, I've already made the motion, it's been seconded, so it's within the purview of the commission, and we'd need unanimous consent to this. But if there's no objection, I would revise that motion to say 45,000 for the first 3 years, and thereafter as determined by the city as to whether we need to increase that amount based on Commissioner Humphrey's comment.
I second that amendment to the original motion as an amendment.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, but we had Commissioner Broyles had a comment before the motion was made, so I'll go there.
Thank you. Commissioner Helfrey answered some of my questions by her question. And I'm just a little concerned now that we've changed that motion. And does that then leave the developer? When does that end? If you extend that $45,000 past 3 years, I'm not quite clear on that.
It's actually the homeowners association, not the developer, and that will depend on what the city, starting with the Planning and Zoning Commission, decides at every 3-year interval. In fact, if it becomes a non-issue, then the Planning and Zoning Commission, as representative of the city, could decide with council approval that it ends. On the other hand, as Commissioner Helfrey indicated, if we are not accurate in the cost for this and it ends up being 75, then the city would have the ability to increase that. And again, it's on the homeowners association, those who enjoy and participate as homeowners in that development once they buy the homes, not the developer. And I think that's an important distinction.
That extended explanation is helpful for me to vote. Thank you.
Mr. Vunich, you had your hand up.
I'll defer to the commission members, but if I do have an opportunity,
I'll follow up with you. Commissioner Jackson.
So when we originally approved this, I had concerns from my vast experience around waters, creeks, etc. We approved it, and there was a condition that on the site planning is when MSD and everything else came into play. We've got all these new homes and pavement, non-porous surfaces that are going to be contributing to the tributary Bottom Creek. So this motion essentially protects the city if there's erosion, et cetera, at all. Got it. How many properties, and if Joe can refresh my memories, that are affected downstream from that may have more water? I think there was a pond ballpark possibly, if I remember right, and there may be a few homes on the creek. How are they protected? We were protecting the city, but how are they protected if there's an increased level of water from the non-porous surface, which I approved the original because in the site planning, Joe said that's when we would get all the engineering from MSD et al., the state, and whoever else is responsible for that area of the bridge, et cetera. So that's my train of thought. And I'd like Joe to answer that if he could, or anyone.
In the current conditions for stormwater improvements that are part of attachment B, above the item we're just now discussing, there is another requirement that basically says a letter of credit shall be required by the city of Wildwood to cover downstream damage. There's not an amount associated with that. That'll be something that we'll come up with as we go through the site development plan process. But we've thought ahead and are asking for a guarantee, so to speak, that we would have in place in the event there is problems downstream.
All right, Joe. So I'm gonna make very clear that letter of credit is very critical for my final vote, period. That's just from my experience, because I'm worried about the city's taking care of our end here, potentially, unless it's more. But I'm worried about those citizens that have lived peacefully on a creek with normal tributary flow of flooding. They probably built their homes or whatever else so many feet back and up a hill, and that changes, right? So that's very critical for my final vote. I'm just gonna be very clear on that.
And if you like, I can ask Mr. Stock, with the permission of the chair and commission, to explain that the design of the stormwater management system here actually is a little different in terms of how it's being approached. And it's more the discharge than, for all intents and purposes, holding. I guess what I'm saying is that right now we're looking at holding 80%, 86% of the water from the, I'm messing this up, so I apologize. If Mr. Stock wouldn't just mind doing it very quickly, I think it'd be beneficial to hear from Mr. Jackson.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mayor Bolin, and
Go ahead.
Council Member Bros. My name is George Stock. I'm with Stock and Associates Consulting Engineers. Take that off. And just commenting on the stormwater management, this particular site is going to be governed by release rates tributary to Bottom Creek. So as a result, we will be attenuating flows well below the pre-developed runoff that's currently existing on the site. As Mr. Vunich mentioned, we had included a stormwater memorandum with this submission that was made last Friday. And the reduction in the rate of runoff between the 2-year 24-hour storm and the 100-year 24-hour storm, the pre-developed to the post-developed, we are reducing that runoff by 87% on the 2-year and 60% on the 100-year. And that's done through the stormwater management plan that's been part of the discussion, the bioretention adjacent to the streets, treating and infiltrating transpiration of the water from the source, as well as the detention basins that will be placed on site. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I think from a layperson's perspective, which is mine, the amount of stormwater to be detained and released will be less than the pre-development condition that exists now.
Commissioner
which is
Helfrich.
a high standard.
Okay, I have two questions. The first one is, I think there's a motion, and I'm not sure what the motion is. And my second question is, on one of the added documents that was sent to us via Travis, it was a plot plan exhibit for lots 59 through 61. And it looks like one of the houses was maybe the placement was moved on the lot, and it shows stormwater drainage. Does that have anything to do with what we're discussing right now? So my questions are that one document, and is there a motion, and what is it? Thank you.
Mr. Vunich, and then I want to comment on something after you say something here.
The document that Ms. Helfrey is referencing relates more toward the dimensions and the flexibility requested for the right-of-way.
Okay, so I want to comment, and then we'll move on to Mayor Boland's motion. We are getting a little ahead of ourselves here for what we are doing. The items that Scott Jackson, Commissioner Jackson is referring to come in final development plan form, which we will see once again. So we will have a chance to review that. There are three components with stormwater as we proceed for the Clean Waters Act of the United States. And the first element Commissioner Helfrey was talking about are what are best management practices, or BMPs. And those are the bioretention elements, and those will be on the sides of the street. And what that does is that filters out the impurities in the runoff water and captures it in those areas. They're swales, they have plant life and rocks, and they're designed for that primary purpose. They are not ponds with fountains, and they are not meant to be beautiful front yards. So the maintenance element that Mayor Boland is after is to maintain those to be functional entities of the stormwater system. I think it's very important because I could see the neighbors blowing all their grass clipping and blowing all their leaves into these areas and ruining them. The second issue with stormwater is siltation and retention, and that consists of the basins. We'll have a chance to review that in site development plan approval. And then the third aspect of this is the release rate, and that is basic engineering, of which Mr. Stock will have a plan which we can all review, and that can be discussed ad nauseum, basically. So what I'd like to do is move on to Mayor Boland's proposal, and we'll get through this phase, and then we'll move on to final site development plan approval. Mayor Boland.
So to answer Commissioner Helfrey's question, the motion on the floor, and I'm going to revise it once more here, subject to the commission's approval of the overall plan, again, to come back to the commission as Chair Lee mentioned, that $45,000 would be required to be escrowed for the bioretention issue. It would be evaluated by the commission at every 3-year interval, at which time it could be increased for the reasons that Commissioner Helfrey and Chair Lee mentioned. And I would like to add, if there's no objection, that the letter of credit that was mentioned in the report and was suggested by Commissioner Jackson be made part of that motion as a requirement. So that is the motion.
Perfect.
Sorry, Commissioner Helfrey.
Okay, first of all, don't get mad at me. I have a question about the wording in this. Mr. Vunich, when I read this number 8 in the blueprint on what you gave us, it says the deposit would be held until such time that the residents hold a majority of positions on the board, then to be dispersed for use. And for all of you who don't know, the reason I'm paying such close attention to this is because in our neighborhood, we had a very different situation where the builder left us holding the bag, and the city had to come in and really help us straighten that mess out. And so when it says there that you are going to disperse it back to the builder, how then are we going to continue to ask? I guess I'm just very confused on this $45,000 from the builder. Is what's going to happen is we're going to say, you have to give us this money in escrow. Then when they get whatever is required, 75% or 51%, the homes are built, that then the clock starts running or it stops running? Because it seems to me that when they're going to start having problems with these is after the builder's gone, after all the houses are built, after everybody's in there, about 3 to 5 years down the road, or 2 or 3 years down the road, they're gonna have trouble. And so I'm so sorry, but I just need to understand that for the homeowners. Thank you.
If I may,
Mayor Bowen.
yeah, if I may, and Joe, my apology here. Without regard to what Joe put in his report, the motion is that we're going to get $45,000 from the HOA to escrow as an escrow with a bond for the initial 3 years that can be increased. And relative to that question about what happens if the developer does this or the residents do that, the purpose of this motion, which will be reviewed every 3 years with a bond and the ability to increase or decrease, means it doesn't really matter. It's what's going to be determined by the commission and the city, period.
Any other discussion?
Nothing more than I'll second the amendment that Mayor Bowen put forth.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Vunich, do you want to recap before we vote?
As the department understands it, we are requiring a $45,000 escrow for the purposes of stormwater management. It will be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission every 3 years. Excuse me, to understand if it needs to be increased or not. And thereafter, excuse me. And now it also includes the bond for downstream properties.
And that is to be by the HOA.
Yes. So the developer is the initial HOA, and thereafter it becomes the homeowner-based HOA, and the requirement will carry forward from the developer to the residents.
Okay.
All
right,
I think, Joe, that there was the bond and then there's the letter of credit as well.
Yes.
Those are two separate things.
Yes, I believe the mayor wanted the motion is for two separate things.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor in second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Mayor Bowen.
Okay, I have another motion. This relates to the roundabout. The motion is subject to the commission's approval of the development finally, that whether it is a roundabout or other public improvement as may be determined by the city, that 1/2 the cost be provided by the developer, and that if it is not used within 5 years, then for any improvement, whether it is a roundabout or other public improvement, it would be refunded to the developer.
I have a motion on the floor. Councilman Brost.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstentions? One opposition. Commissioner Broyles, you had your hand up?
No.
No? Okay. And then abstain? Okay. Mr. Newberry, we had one against.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have Mr. Beatty as nay on that vote.
Yes.
Also, sorry, on the previous one, my Zoom was cutting out during that vote. I don't support the previous one either.
Okay. Mayor Boland.
Well, I have one final motion, and this relates to the porches, the architectural issue, which also includes, I believe, the setbacks that relate to the porches. I would move that the elevations that have been presented by the developer, with the exception of Montegro D3, which had a 4-foot setback, and any other proposal that has anything less than a 5-foot setback be omitted from the development, but contingent on the commission's approval of this project going forward, that the elevations and the porches as presented be approved, which essentially means that it is porches of 5.5 feet, I believe, and greater.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for 5.5 feet of porch. Do we have a second? Councilman or Commissioner Cohn, sorry. Second? Okay. And
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Levitt?
Yeah, just in looking at those elevations, it appears that the majority of them, in fact, meet that standard. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct. And then I
Thank you.
would add that if the developer wanted to extend the porch from 4 feet to 5.5 feet on the other home, that they can do that as well. Mayor Bowen, would you be amenable to that?
Thank you for asking. It would depend on what they do with the fake balcony above.
Well, they have to go through architectural review,
They
so
do.
that has to occur regardless.
Right.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
One abstention? Okay.
So now, Mr. Chairman, just for your information, I believe that takes care of all the issues. The package is now presented to the commission. If someone wants to make a motion up or down, I'll leave that to others. And thank you for indulging me. I hope it was helpful getting through all these things. I thought it would be more efficient to kind of handle these on a one-off basis. So thank you.
I do have one question. There was condition 2D, garage doors, 4B, parking setbacks, and 4Z, street lights. Mr. Vunich, is the developer accepting those conditions?
I would ask that Mr. Doster respond as the petitioner's counsel.
Is it okay from the commission if I have Mr. Doster explain those items? All right, Mr. Doster, podium's yours. That would be
Thank
the
you, Chair,
last,
Lee.
the last few
Pardon me.
conditions there.
Is Z the street lights? Is that correct?
Z is the street lights.
I think we're okay with that one. So I'd like to address the others.
Okay, let's.
I
do
understood the.
garage doors first. 2D.
Okay, what I'd like to do, if I may, is get some clarification on the prior motion that was passed. What I understood from that motion was that Mayor Boland was moving to accept all the elevations except the one that he didn't like, and any elevations that had porch depths less than 5.5 feet.
That's correct.
I believe with that motion, the way it was stated, it would answer the other distances.
Yep.
At least that's the way we understood.
Okay, so the garage doors would be considered approved based on that?
Correct.
And then parking setback would be a site planning issue, which wouldn't really have anything to do with elevations.
Mr. Chair, I concur with Mr. Doster. Based upon the previous motion that was approved, the other items will have to be modified to reflect the 5.5 foot depth versus 6 feet and correspond to the elevations as presented.
Okay. All right, so that answers that question. Thank you, Mr. Doster.
Thank you for permitting me to speak.
So all of the items that the department has raised have been addressed. Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Jackson?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I think, so I have clarification in the architectural and design area. That's where I think there was a question come up about backing out onto the street and not having the opportunity to pull out into the street. Is that where the garage door setback comes into play? Or do I have that wrong? That came up in the last meeting.
The garage door setback was more of an architectural issue.
Oh.
Access into and out of the lots has been addressed.
Okay, that's okay. We're past that. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't clear on that part.
Commissioner Helfrey.
So, Mr. Vunich, what is the normal garage setback in that area? Because I did not realize that the vote that we were taking was also on the garage doors. What was the required garage door setback?
15 feet from
Right.
the imaginary line of the front elevation of the dwelling, which could include the 6-foot minimum depth porch.
So I want to change my vote then, because I don't approve of that. I have had a lot of complaints of other developments where there's supposed to be a walkable community and you walk down the street or drive down the street and all you see is garage doors. So I changed my vote because I don't support the garage setbacks being moved up. Sorry. Thank you.
Regardless of the change by Commissioner Helfrey, the majority still stands and that was approved.
That's okay. I just wanted it on the record. Thank you, Mr. Vunich.
Commissioner Depler.
I concur with Commissioner Helfrey's assessment, and I want to change my vote as well, just for the record.
Mayor Boland. You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Just for information for the commission, one of the reasons that I made that motion, and I do share the view that the farther back, the better. However, I looked at a number of things on a broad bird's eye view of this area, and I believe the Westridge Oaks subdivision, which, or the Westridge subdivision, which is across from the YMCA, sort of catty corner to this, and it, you know, granted, could have been zoned differently and that sort of thing, but nevertheless, it's in the vicinity, and I believe it has very similar setback requirements and garage requirements. So that's one of the reasons that I made that motion, just for your information.
Okay, we have been
Mr.
through
Chair.
Mr. Vunich.
Before we proceed forward, I need to ask Mr. Newberry, with the change in votes requested by Ms. Depler and Ms. Helfrey, and the nay vote by Mr. Beatty, were there any other abstentions or?
Mr. Chair, I have, with the changes from Ms. Helfrey, Ms. Stepler, and as Mr. Vunish described, the nay vote by Mr. Beatty, I have a 7-3 vote on that particular motion.
Thank you.
Just wanted to check and make sure. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, we have been through all of the action items. I'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny the department's recommendations. Commissioner Levitt.
Motion to approve with the motions included that we just went through, of course.
Okay, Commissioner Broyles.
I second it.
Okay. Having discussed all items and try to keep this on point, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Newberry, reading.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Cohn,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Beatty,
No.
Commissioner Depler,
No.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
No.
Commissioner Levitt,
Yes.
Chair Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Bowman.
Yes.
Matters approved by a vote of 7-3. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, we have one other item for consideration. Mr. Vunich, are you presenting this?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as you know, at the conclusion of 2019, the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted a work program. In that work program, there were high, medium, and low priority areas. One of those items and one of the areas was the work of the Watershed Erosion Task Force. The thought was that potentially in 2020, there'd be action items coming out of the task force for consideration of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Tonight, the department is providing you an update on their activities. So as you know, that they are working towards some recommendations, some of which will need to be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, particularly in the ordinance areas. But at this stage, there is nothing available for the commission to consider. But I didn't want to leave the work program item unanswered, so that's the cause of the update. If there are any questions regarding the update letter that was provided by the department, we'd be glad to answer them. And I would note that there are members of this commission that are on the task force as well. And if they'd like to add anything, certainly the chair could allow that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. I have a question, and that is, when will the task force complete its goals and be able to present us with the nature of the developments that we have underway?
That's a very good question. They've been focused on three primary areas: identifying the extent of problems in some of the more developed watersheds. Secondly, to look at funding mechanisms so that they can be addressed. And then thirdly, the ordinance review. The ordinance review is underway, and I hope to have that at the start of the new year.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, that concludes the items on tonight's agenda. So may I have a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Helfrey? And I need a second. Councilman Brost, second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you all. We appreciate it very